My name is Sophia Marshall, and I'm 21 years old now. But the story I'm about to share began 4 years ago, when I had just turned 17. That was the day my life, which had always seemed like a carefully arranged picture in a glossy magazine, shattered with just a few cold words. Welcome to RevengeAmy channel. Your support is what keeps us going and allows us to continue telling inspiring stories of justice, healing, and self-worth. Help our channel reach our first 1,000 subscribers by liking and subscribing. Now let's get back to the story. I had grown up believing I was the daughter of James Marshall, a successful corporate lawyer in New York City, and Diane Marshall, an interior designer whose clients were wealthy enough to have their homes featured in architectural magazines. From the outside, our lives looked flawless. We lived in a sprawling colonial home in Westport, Connecticut, with perfectly manicured lawns and shiny luxury cars in every driveway. Anyone passing by would think we were the perfect American family. But appearances are deceiving. I had always sensed I didn't quite belong. With my dark brown curls and olive skin, I never resembled my parents, both of whom were fair-skinned with sleek blonde hair. Strangers often assumed I was a foreign exchange student when we were out together. My mother would laugh politely, but the smile never reached her eyes. It was clear to me, physically and emotionally, that I was different. The Marshalls were methodical and precise in everything they did, from their investment strategies to their social calendars. I was nothing like that. I loved stories, daydreams, and writing. My bedroom was always messy, with notebooks scattered everywhere, while the rest of the house gleamed with pristine order. My mother would sigh with disappointment. "Sophia, why can't you be more organized like your father and me? This artistic temperament won't get you far in life." So I tried. I pushed myself into academics, believing that if I couldn't be like them naturally, maybe I could at least earn their pride. I studied late into the night, joined every academic club I could, and fought for perfect grades. Whenever I came home with straight A's, my father barely glanced at my report card before giving a curt nod. "That's what we expect. Never a good job. Never we're proud of you." Their affection was tied to performance, never unconditional. When I was 12, a moment of truth slipped through the cracks. At a family Christmas gathering, my Aunt Margaret Reed hugged me after I opened a leather journal she had given me. She whispered, "You may not be blood, but you're still family to me." I froze, confused, but before I could ask, she changed the subject, her cheeks flushing red. Later, I asked my mother about it. She brushed it off. Margaret had too much eggnog. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the years, I noticed the subtle ways my questions about family history were deflected. For a 7th grade project on genetic traits, I asked my parents if there were any illnesses that ran in the family. My father hid behind his newspaper. Nothing worth mentioning. When I pressed about Grandpa's heart condition, my mother snapped, "Sophia, enough. Just write that we're healthy and move on." When I was 13, I stumbled upon an old photo album while searching for Halloween decorations in the attic. The first pages showed baby pictures of me, but they looked different, taken in a hospital room I didn't recognize with people I didn't know holding me. I rushed downstairs to show my mother, but she yanked the album from my hands. "You shouldn't be rummaging through private things. The attic is off limits." Her tone was sharp. Final.by 14, my suspicions had hardened into near certainty. I confided in my best friend, Jennifer Carter, as we sat in her messy bedroom sharing chips. "Maybe your parents are just private people," she suggested kindly. But I shook my head. "It's more than that. It's like there's a wall between us. Sometimes I catch them looking at me like I don't belong in their house." At night, I would lie awake wondering who I really was. Was there someone out there who shared my unruly curls, my love for writing, my habit of talking with my hands? Someone who felt like home in a way the Marshalls never did. School became my refuge. I joined the creative writing club, pouring my emotions into stories about lost children searching for true homes, about secrets hidden behind perfect facades. My English teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, noticed. "You capture emotions so authentically," she told me. "That's rare. You should pursue writing." I dared to mention this dream at home once. My father scoffed. Writers don't make money, Sophia. We've invested too much in your education for you to waste it on a hobby. Every choice I made, dance classes, summer programs, extracurriculars, was measured against how it would look on a college application to Yale or Harvard. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a project, an investment, something to polish for display. By 16, the emotional gap between us had become a canyon. Outwardly, I played the role of the perfect daughter. But privately, I began researching adoption and family law, determined to uncover my origins. That summer I finally acted. My parents left for a weekend charity gala in Manhattan, and I seized the chance. My father's office was usually off-limits, but I knew his oak file cabinet contained the answers I was desperate for. The bottom drawer was always locked. My hands shook as I used a paperclip and screwdriver, tricks I had learned from online tutorials, to pick it open. Inside, the folders were neatly labeled. One read simply, "Our adoption." My pulse thundered as I pulled it out. There it was in black and white. A certificate from Golden Futures Private Adoptions, naming my birth mother as Amanda Wilson, a 17-year-old girl from Albany. I had been only 3 days old when given up. The reason? Mother unable to provide adequate care. No mention of a father. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't the revelation itself that cut the deepest. I had suspected for years. It was the betrayal, the deliberate lies, the way they dismissed my questions and shut me out of the truth. I carefully photographed every page with my phone, then placed the folder back exactly as I had found it. That was when another folder caught my eye. Cayman Holdings. Inside were bank transfer records, hundreds of thousands of dollars to offshore accounts under names I'd never heard. Letters from a man named Victor Bartel discussed clean transfers and untraceable donations. I didn't fully understand the terminology, but I knew enough to sense corruption. The sound of the garage door jolted me. They had come home early. Heart racing, I shoved everything back, relocked the drawer, and slipped out just in time. That night, I lay in bed staring at the photos on my phone. I wasn't Michelle Marshall. I had been born Rel Wilson. My mother, Amanda, had been barely older than I was now when she gave me up. Did she want to? Did she think about me? Did she write stories too? The Marshalls were not just hiding the fact that I was adopted. They were hiding crimes. From that night on, I began keeping a secret journal documenting every odd behavior, every suspicious phone call. Because now I knew. The truth about who I was, and who they were, was darker than I had ever imagined. The morning after that terrifying discovery, I sat at the breakfast table staring at my adoptive parents with new eyes. James Marshall scanned the financial news on his tablet as usual, while Diane sipped her coffee, flipping through fabric samples for a client. To anyone else, it was an ordinary Saturday morning. But to me, every gesture seemed laced with hidden meaning. These weren't just strict parents hiding an uncomfortable truth. They were people concealing crimes. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of their behavior. My father increasingly took phone calls outside, either in the car or pacing the backyard, lowering his voice so I couldn't hear. My mother, whenever I walked into her design studio, would quickly switch computer screens, her smile too tight, too rehearsed. One evening, I heard my father's voice drift in from the patio. "The Singapore account is clean. Used that one for the Anderson transfer." My heart thudded. I scribbled it down in the leather journal Aunt Margaret Reed had once given me, the very journal that had started my doubts years earlier. Now it had become my logbook of secrets with dates, times, and notes of everything I overheard that night. I transferred photos, screenshots, and snippets of conversations onto an external hard drive. I didn't know what I would eventually do with this information, but something inside me told me to keep collecting. One day it might matter. The pressure of carrying this secret life was immense. My schoolwork started slipping for the first time ever. My calculus teacher called home to express concern. That evening, my mother confronted me in the kitchen, arms folded. "Your teacher says you've been distracted in class. What's going on?" I swallowed, forcing my face into neutrality. "I've been dealing with some personal issues." Her expression hardened. "What personal issues could you possibly have? We give you everything." This phase of rebellion must end now. We have expectations. There it was again, the word that defined my life with them. Expectations. Not love, not concern. Just performance. Later that week, I poured out my turmoil to Jennifer Carter, the only person I trusted completely. We sat cross-legged in her family's treehouse, the wooden planks creaking beneath us, the same place we'd whispered secrets since we were kids. I showed her the photos of my adoption certificate, my hands shaking, her eyes widened. Oh my God, Soph. So it's true. What are you going to do? I bit my lip. I don't know. Part of me wants to confront them, but I'm scared. And it's not just about the adoption anymore. There's other stuff I found. Offshore accounts, letters, transfers. It looks shady. Jennifer leaned in. That sounds like money laundering. My Uncle Mike is a financial investigator. He always talks about offshore accounts. This is serious. A lump formed in my throat. They're still my parents, I whispered, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Jennifer squeezed my hand. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does. And from everything you've told me, they haven't shown you much of that. Her words lodged deep inside me as months passed. The tension in our house escalated. James and Diane interpreted my emotional withdrawal as rebellion, not the weight of the secrets I carried. They became more critical, more controlling. My father began lecturing me about my attitude. My mother compared me unfavorably to her friends' children, who were apparently more obedient and polished. One night at dinner, my father insisted I attend a dinner party with his colleagues. These connections are important for your future. I hesitated. Maybe I want to build my own connections. His fork clattered against the plate. My mother jumped in. We've sacrificed so much for you. The least you could do is show gratitude. Gratitude? As if taking me in had been some kind of charity. The real breaking point came when discussions turned to college. James had always envisioned me following his footsteps. Yale undergrad, then Harvard Law. He'd been grooming me for it since elementary school. One night he announced, I've arranged for you to meet with Dean Whitmore at Yale next month. He'll give you insights into admissions. I froze. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to speak. I'm not sure I want to apply to Yale. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face darkened. My mother's fork hovered midair that I swallowed hard. I've been looking into journalism programs. Northwestern, Syracuse. They have amazing programs. My mother's voice dripped disdain. Journalism? That's not a serious career path. It is for me, I said firmly. I love writing. I'm good at it. My father's laugh was cold. You think you can support yourself writing little stories? Passion doesn't pay bills, Sophia. We didn't invest 17 years just to watch you throw away your future. The word investment sliced through me again. That's all I was to them. A stock they had bought, expecting a return. Something in me snapped. Maybe if you had a real daughter, she'd follow your perfect plan. I blurted before I could stop myself. The silence was explosive. Diane's face drained of color. James's eyes narrowed. What did you just say? Panic surged. Nothing. I'm sorry. I'm stressed about applications. The moment passed, but I knew the damage was done. They exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. But I felt the shift in the air as my 17th birthday approached. The tension became unbearable. My parents planned a lavish dinner at a high-end restaurant, inviting colleagues and friends, like everything else in our lives. More performance than celebration. They presented me with an expensive diamond-studded watch. This is the kind of timepiece successful people wear, my father said. Not a gift for me, but a tool to mold me into his image. When one of his partners asked about my college choices, James answered for me. Yale, of course. Then Harvard Law. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Actually, I'm exploring journalism programs. The table went silent. My father's laugh was too loud, covering the awkwardness. Kids today, always changing their minds. Don't worry, she'll come around. But later in the car ride home, his voice was ice. You embarrassed us tonight. By having my own opinion? I asked softly. By being deliberately contrary after everything we've done for you, Diane snapped. Do you even know the sacrifices we've made? I couldn't hold back. Sacrifices? You live in a mansion, drive luxury cars, take exotic vacations. What exactly have you sacrificed for me? My father's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You have no idea what we went through to get you. The phrasing struck me like a blow. Not to adopt you. Not to have you. To get me. As though I had been acquired, I whispered, almost involuntarily. Maybe if you told me the truth about where I came from, I'd understand. The car swerved slightly as he gripped the wheel. That's enough, Sophia. This discussion is over. But it wasn't. Something had broken between us, something that couldn't be fixed with silence or expensive gifts. The next morning, I would learn just how conditional their version of parental love really was. The morning after my 17th birthday, I woke up with a strange heaviness pressing on my chest. The lavish dinner, the diamond-studded watch, the tense silence in the car, it all lingered like a bitter aftertaste. But nothing could have prepared me for what awaited downstairs. When I walked into the kitchen, James and Diane Marshall were already seated at the table. Not with their usual casual coffee and newspaper routine, but sitting stiffly, fully dressed as if heading to a business meeting. My father wore pressed slacks and a button-down shirt, my mother a designer dress with her diamond rings catching the morning light. Their expressions were cold, almost clinical. Sit down, Sophia, my father instructed, gesturing to the chair across from them. His tone wasn't paternal. It was the voice he used with junior associates at his law firm. My stomach dropped. I obeyed cautiously, tugging at the sleeve of my pajamas, suddenly feeling like a child about to be scolded. We need to talk, James began, his hands folded neatly on the table. Diane nodded in agreement, her face unreadable. Your father and I have been reviewing your recent behavior. Your attitude, your lack of gratitude. Confusion and dread twisted inside me. Is this about college? I told you I just want to figure out what's right for me. This is about much more than college, James said, his voice clipped. This is about 17 years of investment with diminishing returns. The word made my chest tighten. Investment. That was all I was to them. My mother tilted her head, studying me like a stranger. Then in a voice as sharp as broken glass, she said, Well, Sophia, you're adopted, you know. Pack your stuff. It's about time you find your own way. The word slammed into me even though I had known the truth for months. Hearing it weaponized, used as justification for abandonment, sent a wave of shock through my body. James's expression didn't waver. We've fulfilled our legal obligations. You're nearly an adult now. It's time you take responsibility for yourself, especially since you've made it clear you won't follow our guidance. I stared at them, my mind spinning. They were discarding me. Not for something I had done, but because I didn't fit into their vision anymore. James slid a folded check across the table. We're prepared to provide a modest stipend for 6 months. After that, you're entirely on your own. What struck me wasn't fear or sadness, it was clarity. They had never truly loved me. I had been an accessory to their perfect suburban tableau, a project to showcase at dinner parties. Now that I no longer suited their purposes, I was disposable. I could have cried, begged, promised to be the daughter they wanted. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and said calmly, I understand. I'll pack my things. For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in their eyes. Perhaps they had expected tears, screaming desperate pleas. My composure unsettled them. You have until noon, James said briskly, glancing at his watch. We have a charity function this afternoon. Of course, their social calendar wouldn't pause even for the expulsion of their only child. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, heart pounding but mind strangely clear. I pulled out my largest backpack and began filling it with essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the journal where I had recorded their suspicious activities. Most importantly, I tucked in the external hard drive containing every photograph and document I had collected from my father's office. As I zipped up the bag, my phone buzzed. It was Jennifer. When I answered, my voice came out steadier than I felt. They're kicking me out. What? She gasped. Why? They told me I'm adopted and said their obligations are over. They want me gone. That's horrible, Sophia. Come here. My parents will let you stay with us. I know they will. Warmth spread through me at her words. Jennifer's family had always been different. Messy, loud, genuine. Her mother, Laura Carter, taught elementary school, and her father, Tom, ran a hardware store. Their home was chaotic but alive, full of real arguments and real love. Exactly what I'd always longed for. Thank you, I whispered, fighting back tears for the first time since this morning. It was strange. Kindness was harder to bear than cruelty. By 11:30, I had packed everything I could carry. I paused to take one last look around my bedroom. The posters, the books, the mementos of a childhood that now felt like an elaborate deception. Then I slung the backpack over my shoulders and picked up a duffel bag with the rest of my belongings. When I came downstairs, James was absorbed in emails on his phone. Diane leafed through a design magazine. They didn't ask if I needed help. They barely looked at me. The check should cover your immediate needs, James said, still not meeting my eyes. Use it wisely. I set the house key on the table beside the untouched check. I won't need your money. And I won't be contacting you for more. That made Diane's mask slip for a moment. Her perfectly made-up face showed the first real emotion of the day, surprise. Don't be foolish, Sophia, she said. You have no job, no place to live. I have friends, I replied simply. Real ones. Their silence followed me as I walked to the front door. Neither moved to hug me, or even say goodbye. They just sat there, two strangers in expensive clothes who had shared their house but never their hearts, on the front step. I paused and inhaled deeply. The spring air was cool, fresh, and for the first time it smelled like freedom. Behind me lay a house built on secrets and conditional affection. Ahead was uncertainty, but also possibility as I walked down the driveway. The weight of the hard drive in my backpack pressed reassuringly against me. Inside it was evidence that could destroy the perfect life James and Diane had constructed. They thought they were discarding a liability. They had no idea what I knew, or what I was capable of. Jennifer's family welcomed me with open arms. Laura hugged me tightly, eyes blazing with anger on my behalf. No child should be treated that way. Adopted or not, you were their daughter. Their modest 4-bedroom house felt warmer than the mansion I had just left. That first night, lying in their guest room, I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, combing through the documents I had gathered. Bank statements with suspicious transfers, letters from Victor Bartell, adoption papers from Golden Futures. Something about the agency's name nagged at me. I typed Golden Futures Private Adoptions into the search bar. Almost nothing came up. Just a defunct website that hadn't been updated since 2010. For an organization that had once placed newborns with wealthy families, the digital silence seemed suspicious. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. The marshals might have cut me off, but they hadn't silenced me. Not when I had the truth in my hands. And so at 17 years old, discarded by the people who had raised me, I began planning the path that would not only uncover my true identity but also expose theirs. Life with the Carter family felt almost surreal at first. Their modest 4-bedroom home was filled with warmth and laughter, the kind of chaotic love I had always imagined but never experienced. Laura would ask about my day with genuine interest, and Tom would tease Jennifer and me when we spent hours studying in the living room. Unlike the Marshalls, they weren't performing for anyone. They were simply being themselves. Yet even in this safe environment, the weight of secrets pressed down on me. At night, after Jennifer went to bed, I would sit in the guest room with my laptop open, scrolling through the files I had copied from James's office. The more I looked at them, the more troubling they became. Transfers to offshore accounts, correspondence with Victor Bartell, vague references to clean donations, and untraceable transfers. It looked like textbook money laundering, even to my untrained eye. But one set of records unsettled me more than the rest: payments connected to Golden Futures Private Adoptions. Several large transfers, including one for $300,000, had been made to a shell company linked to the agency right around the time of my adoption. It didn't feel like standard adoption fees. It felt like something darker. One evening, Tom noticed me hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table. "What are you working on so intently, Sophia?" he asked gently. I hesitated, just trying to understand where I came from. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Jennifer mentioned you've been digging into some financial stuff too. My brother Mike works as a financial investigator for the state. If you ever want someone to take a look, I can ask him." His casual offer opened a door I hadn't even dared to knock on. The following weekend, Mike Carter came over for dinner. Afterward, Jennifer and I spread the documents across the dining table. I explained how I had found them and what I suspected. Mike's expression grew increasingly grave as he scanned the papers. "Sophia, where did you get these?" he finally asked. "From James's office. I've been collecting for almost a year." He rubbed his chin. "This looks like classic laundering. Structuring transactions to avoid reporting, shell companies, offshore accounts. It's all here. And these transfers tied to golden futures? They're unusually large and poorly documented." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It could mean your adoption wasn't entirely legal," he said carefully. "Some private agencies cut corners, or worse. They've been known to exploit vulnerable young mothers, essentially selling babies to wealthy clients who don't want to wait through proper channels." The room seemed to tilt around me. "So I might have been bought?" Mike's eyes softened. "It's possible. I'm sorry." The thought chilled me to my core. Had my birth mother truly chosen to give me up? Or had she been pressured, maybe even deceived? With Mike's guidance, I dove deeper into researching golden futures. It didn't take long to uncover its shadowy past. The agency had been shut down in 2010 amid allegations of unethical practices. Its director, Patricia Goldstein, had left the country soon after. Most of the official records were destroyed, but whispers remained on online forums for adoptees, in half-buried news articles, in fragments of lawsuits that never reached court. Through social media groups, I began connecting with others who had been placed through golden futures. A disturbing pattern emerged. Many had been adopted by wealthy families in record time, skipping the usual waiting lists. Several discovered that their birth mothers were very young, often poor, often pressured. Some birth mothers later claimed they had been told their babies had died. One adoptee named Marcus told me over a video call. "A bunch of us tried a class action lawsuit back in 2011, but it fell apart. Records were gone and the key people vanished. We think powerful families covered it up." Each new piece of information fueled both my anger and my resolve. The Marshalls hadn't just hidden my adoption out of shame or discomfort. They had hidden it because it was tainted by corruption. As the school year wound down, I kept building my case. I organized the financial documents chronologically, highlighting suspicious transfers. I compiled testimonies from other adoptees. I even tracked down a former Golden Futures employee on LinkedIn. After several nervous messages, he finally agreed to talk anonymously. "The whole operation was designed to cater to rich clients," he admitted. "Teenagers, women in crisis, they were targeted. The mothers were told their babies would have a better life, but they were never told how much money was changing hands. Sometimes they were told lies to make them sign papers quickly." His words confirmed my worst fears. My adoption wasn't just a private family secret, it might have been part of something criminal. But even as I pieced together this history, a deeper longing stirred inside me. Beyond the anger, beyond the need for justice, there was an ache for identity. Who was Amanda Wilson, the 17-year-old girl listed on my adoption certificate? Did she want me? Did she think of me? Did she share my love for writing, the same creative spark James and Diane had tried to stamp out? I knew one thing for certain. I had to find her. Over long summer nights, Jennifer and I sat in her backyard, staring at the stars as I outlined my plan. "First, I'll finish organizing the evidence against the Marshalls," I explained. "But I also need to track down Amanda. I need to know the truth about where I came from." Jennifer nodded. "We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this." Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in months, maybe years, I believed them. By the time my 18th birthday approached, I felt a new sense of purpose hardening inside me. The Marshalls had discarded me, but in doing so, they had freed me. Freed me to uncover the truth. Freed me to fight for justice. Freed me to find the family that had been stolen from me. They had raised me to be strategic, disciplined, patient, traits they valued for their own shady dealings. Now I would use those same skills against them, and I promised myself this. The secrets James and Diane Marshall had tried so hard to bury would not stay hidden forever. My 18th birthday arrived with none of the elaborate performances that had marked every previous celebration in the Marshall house. No fancy restaurant. No expensive gifts chosen to mold me into their image of success. Instead, I sat at the Carter's kitchen table while Laura brought out a homemade cake covered in messy blue frosting. Tom lit the candles while Jennifer and her younger brother sang off-key. For the first time, I felt celebrated for simply being alive. Not for grades, not for appearances, not for meeting someone else's expectations. Just for being Sophia. Turning 18 gave me new legal freedoms. I could now act independently, file records requests, consult lawyers, pursue investigations on my own. And I knew exactly where to begin. Through Mike Carter's connections, I was introduced to an attorney named Sarah Patel, who specialized in adoption law and financial crimes. We met in her small office above a coffee shop in New Haven. After I spread out my carefully organized folders, Sarah leaned back, visibly impressed. "You've done more groundwork than some investigators I've worked with," she said, flipping through the documents. "But if we want to move forward, we need to be strategic. Powerful people with money don't like being exposed. If they sense what you're doing, they'll try to shut it down." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I nodded. "So what's the plan?" "First, we build a case around golden futures. We can use your father's documents as a starting point, but we'll need corroboration. Other adoptees, former employees, financial experts. We provide information quietly to the right authorities so the investigations happen from the inside out. No warning, no chance for them to cover their tracks." Her clarity steadied me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying this burden alone. Meanwhile, my future outside the Marshall's shadow was beginning to take shape. I had applied to the State University's journalism program and received a full scholarship based on merit and financial need. The acceptance letter felt like a lifeline. Finally, I could channel my passion into something real, something mine. Moving into the dorms that fall was liberating. My roommate, Catherine Catengwen, was a sharp-minded pre-law student with a protective streak. Within weeks, she became not only my confidant but also a valuable ally. "You should turn this into a project," Kate suggested after I shared a carefully edited version of my story. "Professor Ramirez loves when students take on corruption. You'd have access to interviews, archives, resources." Her idea made sense. I proposed a deep-dive investigation into private adoption agencies for my investigative reporting class. Professor Ramirez approved it enthusiastically, praising my initiative. For the first time, my love of writing wasn't dismissed as frivolous. It was being recognized as a tool for truth. As I built my academic investigation, Sarah moved quietly on the legal front. Based on the financial documents I had provided, she submitted an anonymous tip to the State Bar Association about potential ethics violations in James Marshall's practice. "This will trigger a routine audit," Sarah explained. "If they find what we think they'll find, it'll expand into a formal investigation. Once that happens, criminal authorities will get involved." Just knowing that the walls were beginning to close in on James gave me a strange, steady sense of justice. But beyond exposing the Marshalls, my deepest longing was to find Amanda Wilson, the girl who had given birth to me at 17, just a year older than I was when my world collapsed. Through a nonprofit called Truth in Adoption, I started the search. They warned me it could take years. Amanda was a common name, and with limited information, the trail was thin. But I was determined. 6 months into my freshman year, as I juggled classes, investigations, and late-night strategy sessions with Kate, the phone call came. It was Diane. Her voice, usually polished and sharp, now carried a note of strain. "Sophia, we should talk." I froze. "About what?" "Things have been difficult since you left. Your father and I think perhaps we were hasty. We'd like to see you." Translation: the Bar Association's audit had begun and they were getting nervous. I'm doing well, I said evenly. I have a scholarship. I have people who actually care about me. We care about you, she insisted, but her tone was more calculated than affectionate. We always have. We've made mistakes, but we're still your parents. Are you? I asked. Because the last time we spoke, you made it very clear that our relationship had an expiration date. Silence stretched on the line. Finally, she tried again. We'd like to visit campus. Lunch, perhaps. Fine, I agreed, my mind already racing. If they wanted to meet, I would use it to my advantage. But not alone. The following weekend, we met at a crowded cafe near campus. Kate came with me, sharp-eyed and steady, her presence both witness and shield. James and Diane arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably, though I noticed the changes immediately. His face looked more lined, hers more tense despite the layers of makeup. You look well, James said stiffly after the awkward greetings. I'm thriving, I replied honestly. Turns out I just needed the right environment. Diane's eyes flicked around the cafe nervously. Perhaps we should have chosen somewhere more private. I'm comfortable here, I said. So, what did you want to talk about? They exchanged glances before James leaned forward. We've reflected on how things ended. It was hasty. We'd like you to consider coming home. Home? I echoed. You made it very clear that wasn't my home anymore. Of course it's your home, Diane said with forced warmth. We've kept your room exactly as you left it. I almost laughed at the obvious lie. Diane, with her obsession with redesign, would never leave a room untouched for months. Why the sudden change of heart? I asked, watching them closely. James cleared his throat. Family is important. We've always believed that. Is this about the Bar Association audit? I asked for a fraction of a second. His hand froze midway to his glass of water. Diane's perfect mask slipped. Then James recovered, his voice smooth. I don't know what you're talking about. Firms undergo routine checks all the time. Of course, I said lightly, letting the silence do its work. The rest of the meal was tense. They offered to increase my allowance, to cover any gaps my scholarship didn't meet. I shook my head. I'm not interested in your money. I'm building my own life now. By the time they left, their desperation was obvious. Kate leaned toward me as we watched them walk to their luxury SUV. They're scared, she whispered. Whatever you've got on them, it's working. And she was right. 2 weeks later, an email arrived from Truth in Adoption. They had located a possible match. Amanda Wilson was now Amanda Garrett, living in Portland, Oregon. She had been searching for her daughter for years, after being told by Golden Futures that her baby had died. Attached was a photo of Amanda. For the first time, I saw my own features reflected in someone else's face. I sat staring at the screen, my heart pounding, tears blurring my vision. After years of lies, after months of secrets, I was one step closer to the truth. 2 years had passed since the morning James and Diane Marshall told me to pack my things and leave. 2 years since they had revealed, with chilling detachment, that I was adopted and no longer their responsibility. I had walked away carrying nothing but my clothes, a journal, and an external hard drive full of secrets they thought I'd never find. Now, as a junior in college, I was thriving. My investigative journalism series on fraudulent adoption practices had gained national attention, even winning a prestigious student award. Major publications picked up my work. Professors praised my dedication. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I was building something real, something mine. Behind the scenes, the consequences for James and Diane were mounting. The State Bar Association's audit of James's practice had ballooned into a full-scale investigation. Evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and wire fraud surfaced in wave after wave. Diane's design business, once featured in glossy magazines, was exposed as a shell for moving illicit funds. Their perfect suburban empire crumbled brick by brick. They tried desperately to reach me. Emails, voicemails, even handwritten letters delivered to my dorm. But I responded only through Sarah Patel, my attorney, who made it clear that I had no interest in reconciliation. My role was to cooperate with investigators, not to give James and Diane the chance to manipulate me again. But even as their lives collapsed, mine was expanding. Because I had found her. The woman whose name I had whispered to myself in the dark. The young girl from Albany who had given birth at 17. The mother I had never known. Amanda Wilson, now Amanda Garrett. Through Truth and Adoption, we began exchanging cautious messages. Our first video call left both of us in tears. Seeing her face was like looking into a mirror aged 20 years. She had the same curly hair, the same expressive hands, the same creative spark in her eyes. "I never wanted to give you up," she told me, her voice trembling. "They told me you had a heart defect, that you died hours after birth. They even showed me a death certificate." The depth of deception stunned me. Golden Futures hadn't just placed babies illegally. They had fabricated deaths to sever ties forever. Amanda's story spilled out in fragments. Raised in a strict religious household, she had been sent to a maternity home when her pregnancy was discovered. Golden Futures promised her that her baby, me, would be placed with a loving family. But when she gave birth, they told her I hadn't survived. Broken and grieving, she tried to move on. She eventually built a new life in Portland, became a nurse, married Mike Garrett, and had 2 more children, Zach and Lily. But every year, she lit a candle on the day she believed her baby had died. 3 months after our first call, I flew to Portland. The moment Amanda hugged me at the airport, something long fractured inside me began to heal. "You have your grandmother's creative spirit," she told me as we sat at her kitchen table, flipping through photo albums. She was a writer too, always telling stories. Meeting Zach and Lily was like discovering missing pieces of myself. Zach's crooked grin mirrored mine. Lily's laugh sounded so much like my own that it gave me chills. For the first time, I saw my reflection not in a mirror, but in living, breathing family. Meanwhile, the Marshalls' downfall became public spectacle. James was indicted on multiple counts of fraud, laundering, and tax evasion. He was disbarred. His once prestigious law firm shuttered. Diane faced charges of aiding financial crimes through her business. The mansion in Westport was sold under court order. They moved into a cramped condo, a far cry from the empire they had flaunted. When word reached me that James had appeared in court looking gaunt and weary, I felt no triumph, only closure. The people who had treated me as an investment had finally paid the price for their greed. Still, I wanted one last meeting. Not for reconciliation but for truth. Against Sarah's advice, I arranged to see them at a small cafe near the courthouse. The figures who sat across from me were shadows of the people I had once feared. James's tailored suits were gone, replaced with a worn blazer. Diane's flawless polish had cracked, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Thank you for coming," James said, his voice stripped of authority. "I have questions," I replied. They exchanged a glance before Diane nodded. "Did you know Golden Futures was operating illegally when you adopted me?" James exhaled heavily. "We suspected the process was expedited in ways that weren't entirely proper. We'd been on waiting lists for years. When Patricia Goldstein promised us a newborn in months for the right donation, we didn't ask questions." My stomach twisted. "Did you know my mother was told I had died?" Shock flashed across their faces. Diane whispered, "No. We were told your birth mother was a teenager who couldn't provide for you." "Her name is Amanda," I said firmly. "She's a nurse. She has 2 children. And she spent 17 years grieving for a baby she thought was dead." James looked down at his hands. "We didn't know that." "But you knew enough," I pressed. "You hid the truth from me my whole life. You lied. You manipulated. You treated me like property." Diane's voice cracked. "We thought it was better that way. We were afraid you'd find her and love her more than us." The irony hit me like a wave. Their fear of losing my love had guaranteed exactly that outcome. Family isn't biology. It isn't adoption papers. It's love, honesty, respect, I said. And you never gave me those. James opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he seemed to understand the depth of his failure. Diane whispered, "We did love you in our way. Your way wasn't enough, I replied, standing. James looked up, eyes hollow. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for this mess. For failing you as a father. I nodded once, acknowledging but not absolving. I hope you find peace. But my future is elsewhere. As I walked away from the cafe, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had confronted them. I had demanded answers. And I had chosen my path forward, and the months that followed, my life continued to bloom. My articles influenced lawmakers, sparking reforms in adoption regulations. I deepened my relationship with Amanda and the Garretts, visiting Portland for holidays, learning family recipes, laughing with siblings who felt like old friends. With Sarah's help, I founded Ethical Adoption Voices, an advocacy group for adoptees and birth families. We pushed for transparency, for protections, for a world where no one else would endure what Amanda and I had. James eventually pled guilty to reduced charges. He served time in prison. Diane received probation and community service. Their names, once synonymous with prestige, became cautionary tales whispered in legal circles. But by then, their punishment no longer defined me. I didn't need their downfall to heal. Justice mattered, but my energy belonged to building something better. From the wreckage they had left behind. Being cast out at 17 had once felt like the end of everything. In truth, it had been the beginning. The painful push that freed me to discover my origins, my passion, and my true family. Because family, I had learned, isn't about appearances or investments. It's about the people who stand beside you in your darkest hour and remind you that you are enough. And that, finally, was the life I had found. The semester after I confronted James and Diane at the cafe felt like a turning point. For the first time, I wasn't carrying secrets that weighed me down. I was wielding them as tools for change. My investigative series on adoption fraud had been picked up by national outlets, sparking conversations in classrooms, courtrooms, and even state legislatures. At 20 years old, I was no longer the girl who had sat in her bedroom, terrified of being cast aside. I was an investigative journalist in the making, a daughter reconnecting with her true family, and an advocate fighting for transparency in adoption. Life at the university had also shifted. Professor Ramirez encouraged me to expand my series into a capstone project, connecting me with seasoned reporters who treated me like a colleague rather than a student. Kate and Gwen, my roommate, became both study partner and ally. Her sharp legal mind often helped me untangle complex documents. Many nights we spread files across our dorm floor, cross-referencing bank transfers, offshore accounts, and court filings. You know, Kate said one night, tapping a highlighted section, your father didn't just launder money for clients. These patterns show personal enrichment. He wasn't just facilitating, he was profiting. The realization chilled me. The Marshalls hadn't merely been complicit in others' corruption. They had built their entire empire on it. Meanwhile, my relationship with Amanda Garrett deepened. Weekly video calls turned into long visits during school breaks. Amanda would tell me stories about her teenage years, about the grandmother who had been a writer, about the candle she lit every year on my supposed death date. You always existed in my heart, she told me once, tears in her eyes. Even when they told me you were gone, I never stopped feeling like you were out there. Her words stitched together something that had long been torn inside me. Meeting Zach and Lily continued to be its own revelation. Zach would drag me into video games I barely understood, laughing when I failed spectacularly. Lily insisted on teaching me her dance routines from TikTok. Their casual acceptance healed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't just an outsider grafted onto their lives. I was their sister. One afternoon, Amanda and I sat on her porch drinking tea. Do you resent me? She asked quietly. For not fighting harder back then? I shook my head. You were 17, scared, and lied to by people who held all the power. The blame belongs to them. Not you. She exhaled, relief softening her shoulders. I want to make up for lost time, Sophia. I want to be in your life however you'll let me. You already are, I said. Back on campus, my advocacy group, Ethical Adoption Voices, began to grow. What started as a handful of students and adoptees meeting in a library corner turned into a recognized nonprofit with online forums, resource guides, and partnerships with other organizations. We hosted workshops for adoptees navigating identity, panels for birth mothers sharing their stories, and advocacy campaigns for legislative reform. The first time I spoke at a public event, my hands shook as I stood at the podium. But as I looked out at the audience, faces of adoptees, birth parents, foster youth, I found my voice. I was told my family was perfect, I began. But perfection was a mask. Behind it were lies, money, and corruption. When they cast me out, I thought I was alone. But in that loss, I discovered the truth. And I discovered family in places I never expected. Family is not about blood or paperwork. It is about love, honesty, and respect. The room erupted in applause. For the first time, I felt not just like I was surviving but leading. Still, reminders of the Marshalls lingered. Court updates arrived regularly through Sarah. James eventually pled guilty to reduced charges. His disbarment was permanent, his reputation destroyed. He faced prison time, though shorter than I had hoped. Diane struck a plea deal, avoiding jail but sentenced to probation and community service. When I read those words, community service, I felt a strange detachment. The anger that had once burned in me had cooled. Their punishment no longer defined me. I didn't need them to suffer for me to heal. What mattered was building something new. One evening, Jennifer and I sat in her family's backyard, the treehouse silhouetted against the twilight. It had been our refuge since childhood, the place where I had first whispered my suspicions about the Marshalls years ago. "Do you ever think about how different your life is now?" Jennifer asked. "All the time," I admitted. "If they hadn't kicked me out, I'd probably still be pretending to be the perfect daughter, miserable and trapped. Instead, I found my real mother, my siblings, my purpose." She smiled. Funny how what feels like the end of the world can turn out to be the start of something better. Her words echoed the truth I had been living. The Marshalls had cast me out, but in doing so, they had set me free, free to write, free to love, free to build a family of my choosing. By the end of that year, Ethical Adoption Voices had launched a campaign pushing for federal oversight of private adoption agencies. We gathered testimonies from dozens of adoptees, mothers, and even former agency employees. Our slogan was simple: transparency is love. When I stood on the steps of the state capitol to deliver our petition, cameras flashing, reporters scribbling notes, I thought about the girl I had been at 16, sitting alone in her room, afraid to ask questions. She would never have believed this moment was possible. But here I was, and I wasn't done yet. By the time I turned 21, I could hardly recognize the girl I had once been, the one who sat trembling in her bedroom, afraid of being unloved, afraid of asking the wrong questions. That girl had been shaped by silence, by conditional affection, by the weight of secrets she wasn't meant to find. Now my life was filled with noise, the noise of activism, of press conferences, of laughter echoing from the Garrett household during holiday dinners. It was the kind of noise that meant life, growth, and connection. At the university, my investigative series on golden futures had become required reading in several journalism classes. Professor Ramirez often used my work as an example of how lived experience can fuel meaningful reporting. I had even been invited to speak on panels alongside seasoned journalists who once intimidated me. But perhaps the proudest moment came when I walked across the stage to receive an award for investigative excellence. As the audience applauded, I spotted Amanda, Mike, Zach, and Lily cheering from the front row, waving wildly. Tears filled my eyes. For years, I had dreamed of family members in the audience, clapping not for my grades or image, but for me. Now it was real. Meanwhile, Ethical Adoption Voices grew from a campus initiative into a national advocacy network. With Sarah's legal expertise, Kate's sharp research skills, and Jennifer's unwavering support, we built a coalition that pushed for federal reforms. Our campaigns highlighted stories of adoptees who had been silenced, of birth mothers who had been deceived, and of families torn apart by greed. We won small but meaningful victories: stricter oversight for private agencies, mandatory disclosure of adoption fees, better protections for birth parents. Every success reminded me that pain can be transformed into power. Through it all, updates about the Marshalls trickled in. James served his reduced prison sentence quietly, his reputation irreparably shattered. Diane completed her probation and community service, now working in obscurity after her design firm dissolved. Occasionally, they tried to contact me through Sarah, but I never responded. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed anything from them. One spring afternoon, Amanda and I sat together in Portland, flipping through a scrapbook she had started after our reunion. Photographs of my visits, birthday celebrations, Zach's basketball games, Lily's dance recitals, all moments that anchored me in this new chapter. You know, Amanda said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, I spent years lighting candles for a baby I thought was gone. Now I get to light them for the young woman you've become. Her words sank deep into my heart. For so long I had defined myself by what I lacked: love, truth, belonging. Now I defined myself by what I had gained. Jennifer remained my constant. We laughed about the irony that the same treehouse where I had whispered fears at 14 was now the place I planned advocacy campaigns at 21. You've come full circle, she teased one night as we sat beneath the twinkling light strung along the beams. Not full circle, I corrected gently. Forward. Always forward. When graduation approached, I was offered a position at a major investigative magazine. The editor who interviewed me said, "Your work shows not only skill but courage. That's rare in someone so young." On the evening before commencement, I stood on the balcony of my dorm, watching the sun set. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, colleagues, and family. A photo came in from Amanda. Lily had baked a cake that read, "Congratulations, Sophia." In uneven icing letters. As I smiled at the picture, I realized how far I had come from that morning in the Marshall kitchen. When James and Diane told me to leave, they had thought they were discarding a liability, but in reality, they had set me free to uncover the truth, free to choose my path, free to build a family not bound by obligation, but by love. At graduation, when my name was called, I walked across the stage to thunderous applause. I looked into the audience and saw Amanda with tears streaming down her face, Mike clapping proudly, Zach whistling too loudly, and Lily jumping up and down with a sign that said, "We love you, Sophia." It was everything I had ever dreamed of, and more. Later at our celebration dinner, Amanda raised her glass. "To Sophia," she said. "Not just my daughter, not just a journalist, but a woman who turned pain into purpose." As everyone echoed the toast, warmth spread through me. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider peering in on someone else's family. I was exactly where I belonged. Looking back now, I understand that the Marshalls gave me nothing unconditional. But in rejecting me, they unwittingly gave me something greater: the chance to discover my truth, my passion, and the people who would love me without conditions. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: family isn't determined by blood or legality. It's defined by love, honesty, and respect. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you're born or bought into. So to anyone who feels like they don't belong, who has been told they are not enough, know this: somewhere out there are people who will see you, value you, and love you as you are. That is the family that matters. And that is the life I chose, the life I built when I walked away from the house of lies and stepped into the light of truth. Thank you for following this story till the end. If you found this an emotional journey of betrayal, justice, and inner strength, please help RevengeAmy reach its first 1,000 subscribers. Just a like and subscribe. Your support will be a great motivation for us to continue bringing more inspiring stories. Click subscribe today and be a part of this journey. See you in the next stories.